Let's get ready to recall. Yes, tis the season, the time to determine whether we want to recall the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. There's a scant few weeks left before the election. This organization is dedicated to answering the questions that people might have about issues of the day and what bigger issue in the state of California. So let us begin. We are going to be discussing a short history of recalls in the state of California with specific attention to the recall of 2003, the charges against Governor Newsom, and who are the people who are bringing these charges and who want to be the next governor of California. The people backing these challengers, the money involved in this effort, the pollsters' opinion of what the future has in store for us, and more important, the nuts and bolts, the process of voting in the state of California. First of all, let's harken back to the 1900s. And this gentleman here in specific, Hiram Johnson. The progressives tried to take control through the Democratic Party and then the Populist Party, and they were unsuccessful. They finally were successful in gaining control through the Republican Party when they won the election of 1910, and they elected as governor Hiram Johnson. Hiram had a background as a district attorney in San Francisco, where he fought graft and the political machine in San Francisco. So he got the reputation of the battler, hence the poster. The Progressive Party in Sacramento started off with a bang in doubling the electorate by giving the vote to women. Women earned the right to vote in California in 1910. In 1911, further change. The progressives wanted to ensure direct democracy, and they used three weapons to stave off the power in Sacramento at the time, the Southern Pacific Railroad. A formidable opponent, they felt, the progressives, that the Southern Pacific Railroad would make a comeback and try to wrest power back from the progressives. The progressives then came up with three major weapons. First of all, the initiative in California, which we make great use of in this state, they came up with the idea in 1911 to propose new laws circumventing the state legislature, the power of referendum to review any laws passed by the state legislature, and most importantly, what we're discussing today, the power to remove any officials which did not follow the will of the people. So this is how the recall came about in the state of California. And we have made great use of the recall. But has it been successful? Well, of the 179 recall efforts, 55 has specifically been undertaken for the office of governor. Some of you may not know that there have been 5 attempts to recall Governor Newsom. This is the first successful one to come to the ballot. Now, specifically, 6 people were recalled and removed from office. As far back as 1913, coincidentally, one of the progressives who backed the recall movement became the victim of his own initiative, and that was a state senator by the name of Marshall Black, who was convicted of embezzling Palo Alto funds, lost his job. A gentleman who fought the prostitution trade in San Francisco lost his office as a result, because the prostitution movement in San Francisco did him in. In the 1990s, 2 Republican legislators lost their job to their own constituents because they had the temerity to vote with Democrats in key legislation. So that was the penalty for which they had to endure. And most famously in 2003, we're going to spend more time about that, when Governor Gray Davis, as a result of the energy crisis, lost his position. Successful recall, which no doubt inspired the present recall movement that we are part of. In 2018, maybe a recall movement that you're not that familiar with, we had a state senator by the name of Josh Newman, who was a Republican in a seesaw district. People were upset because he voted for increase in taxes. The Republicans in his district rallied to remove him in 2018. Interestingly enough, 2 years later, in 2020, State Senator Newman regained his position. Let's go back to 2018, since we're dealing in history. This is when Governor Newsom won the office in Sacramento, a resounding defeat of John Cox. Yes, that same Mr. Cox, who is back again in 2021 and wanting to challenge Governor Newsom for the office in Sacramento. There are myths on the recall. First of all, that they are successful more often than not. That if you have a special election, it's not quite as successful than our elections held regularly. And that there's not a great turnout in special elections, not like there are in general elections. Let's take a closer look at those myths. First of all, if you hold a recall in a general election, you're going to succeed 64% of the time. And if you have an election on a recall, special election dates, they only result in 57% success rate. But is that turnout? Is that about turnouts? Well, let's take a look at the 2002 election when Governor Newsom, as we mentioned, won the election. There was over almost 8 million people in California who voted in that election. Almost 2 more million people showed up in a special election the next year. So you'd think, okay, well, there's more interest in the race for governor. Not so. Not so, because when the winner of the recall election, Arnold Schwarzenegger, ran for re-election, there were less votes altogether. So the numbers don't support the predictions. If you want another example, Governor Walker, the controversial governor of Wisconsin, he won his initial election in 2010. Over 2 million people came to the polls in Wisconsin. When the recall occurred, there were more voters, 400,000 more voters. So you think, okay, again, there's an upswing in the state of Wisconsin. There's more interest in the race for governor. Not so, because in 2014, the turnout decreased. So it debunks that previous understanding. Let's take a more specific look at the recall of 2003 that I mentioned already. A strategist by the name of Katie Merrill, remember that name, Katie Merrill. She says, hey, the Republican Party is old news in California, never to be heard of again. Is that so, Katie? Can you give us some more bona fides? Well, here we go. Let's look at a comparison between the recall of 2003 and the recall of 2021. Let's look at Governor Davis and compare him with Governor Newsom. In 2003, Governor Davis got a healthy amount of the vote, but not the majority, 47% of the vote. Newsom, a landslide in comparison, 62% of the vote. Now, a good ruler is to see what's happening in LA County, which is dominated by Democrats. Not shabby. Mr. Davis got 62% of the vote, but it pales with a 72% gained by Governor Newsom. But in those days, even though already the GOP was a minority party, it wasn't as weak as it is today. In the state of California, only 24% of the voters call themselves Republicans. We are a much better educated electorate in California, and it's increasing year by year. And because of the energy crisis in California, Davis entered that recall with its abnormally low popularity rating, 26%, whereas Newsom today, much stronger when it comes to his popular rating. And if you recall, in the year 2000, yes, Al Gore was triumphant in the state of California, won by 11 points, but it wasn't even close. In 2020, Trump lost California by 30 points. So, Miss Merrill, you can tell us. Now, let's look at even further differences. The white population in California continues to decrease, whereas Latino voters increase in California. Big difference. And historically, although the differences are decreasing, historically, Democrats dominate with Latino voters. There is no statewide officer in the Republican Party at this time. In the year 2021, social media is a much greater force, and that can be argued both ways, but that is going to make a big difference in the election of 2021. And we did not have the shadow of our former president in the election of 2003. He was a non-entity. Are we done? Nope, there's further differences because in 2021, unlike 2003, there is no Arnold. No Arnold. I want to bring up some interesting information on that election in 2003, which I think is rather interesting. First of all, it was brought out in the election that Arnold was a non-voter, very much like Caitlyn Jenner is being accused of not being interested in appearing at the polling place. Didn't vote in a lot of the elections. They, of course, just weeks, I think it was even days prior to the election, the LA Times had a headline story about groping on the part of Schwarzenegger. Nevertheless, huge numbers when it came to the women vote. Huge numbers when it came to non-Catholic Christians. He was even successful with the Hispanic vote, which I told you historically goes to Democrats. And he was the darling of Republicans. But interestingly enough, when those people were polled, it said that Arnold didn't do a good job of addressing the issues. Nevertheless, he became the governor of California as a result of the 2003 recall. Now, further differences. People our age now remember when once upon a time Republicans had the advantage when it came to absentee voting. But today the tables have turned. Democrats have the advantage, and we are going to have an all-mail ballot. It's nothing new amongst the states of the United States. We are following the lead of states like Oregon and Colorado. They've been doing it successfully for some years now. And as a result, they're having a higher turnout. Okay. What are the charges against Newsom? Where has he fallen short? Well, let's start with the French Laundry incident. Happened in November of 2020. Seems so long ago, doesn't it? Almost a year ago. when he and his friends attended a party at the French Laundry, which is a very elite restaurant in Napa Valley. Hope one day to go there myself. Not much of a gourmand, but I do like a good meal. Anyway, he went there for a holiday party with his friends. Well, there were 3 households. And by coincidence, amongst his friends was the lobbyist and CEO of the California Medical Association, the CMA. So they were high-powered folks. Now, the state had guidelines that such functions were not to occur. And if so, they were to be held outdoors. Well, there were photographs aplenty of the gathering. Because the party was so loud, they attracted attention. You would think they'd want to keep a low profile. They did not. They said, hey, we're outdoors, but they were so loud. How loud were they? They were so loud that they were put into an enclosure, which in all effect made it an indoor occasion. Huge blow to Newsom's image and credibility. Here's what happened. Here's some numbers that back the effect. This happened in November, early November. At that point, 55,000 people had signed the recall petition. A scant 2 days later, after the news of the dinner was disseminated, an additional 400,000 people signed the recall petition. Costly meal indeed. Coincidentally, almost at the same time, the judge who had to make a decision on the deadline, who was approached by the proponent saying, hey, we're having difficulty getting signatures for this petition because of the pandemic. The judge, irrespective of what was happening at the French Laundry, said, you've got a point. These are very different times. We're going to give you an extension of a few months to gain your signatures. So the double whammy of the dinner and the extension was bad news for Newsom. And if that was not enough, Newsom was asked a question about distance learning. And he says, I've had a problem with Zoom school and the challenges surrounding it. Oh, really? Say his opponents, don't your kids go to a private school? And don't they have in-person instructions? More blows to the Newsom family, because the Bee of Sacramento reported that his wife was the head of an organization that produced documentaries. She received donations up to $100,000 that came from companies who were doing business with the state government. Governor Newsom says that might be so, but there is no conflict of interest. It led legislatures in Sacramento to begin thinking of a bill that would, in the future, limit any donations from companies that were doing business with the state of California to organizations of families of elected officials, pending legislation. And bigger knocks against Governor Newsom, the tremendous amount of jobs that were lost through the pandemic, the loss of businesses and the closure of schools. Governor Newsom, early in his tenure, was accused of misrepresenting the acreage in which fire prevention work had been done by the state of California. The difference was huge. There was the scandal in the state unemployment agency, totaling not millions, but billions. The ongoing problem of homelessness in California, and people who cite the high cost of taxes and living in the state of California. Now, it could be argued that just how much does the governor of California control the outcome of these developments? And that would be a good argument that it's the state legislature and sometimes the economy, good old-fashioned capitalism, that controls much of this. Nevertheless, he is the chief executive of the state of California. But it doesn't stop there. More problems. And I know this is scurrilous, and this is only an outlier of problems. But some people accuse Gavin Newsom of just being too darn pretty for a politician, which of course would make me a very successful politician in the eyes of these people, but he just can't win. So if you are pro-recall, let's net it out. You are this way because of the high taxes, and you are laying the problem at the feet of Gavin Newsom. This ongoing problem, homelessness, the fact that our kids can't go to school for direct instruction. And it's your fault, Governor Newsom, because of all the restrictions of the pandemic. The people who are fighting the recall are as dramatic as the pro-recall people. They say, you realize that you are dancing to the tune of QAnon, and also the anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers, and the whole MAGA crowd, and those same people that stormed the national Capitol on January 6th. So there are the two dramatic sides in black and white. And we're not done yet. Yet another argument which has gotten a foothold of late. And the bottom line is, do you want a Republican governor in California? So of course, even though they may not be direct, images of two governors in other national states come to mind. Do we want a Republican governor? Say the anti-recall people. Okay, specifically, let's look at the challenges. Whoa, 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 whoa. Not so fast. Not so fast. We got to talk about the recall itself. How does a recall take place? First of all, you've got to gather signatures. They must be from registered voters, which of course would make them have to be eligible to vote. No signatures from people under 18 or people from outside the state of California. And they must equal the number of petitioners. 12% of the people who voted in the last election for the office of governor. That 12% would total almost 1.5 million people in the case of California. And if you can get them confirmed by the Secretary of State, then you call a recall election within 60 to 80 days. Now, the confirmation drives proponents of the recall to get 1.7 million or 1.8 million signatures, because you realize that some of your signatures are not going to be able to be confirmed. And they were successful in doing that. We do remember that there was an extension which made it easier for people to get the necessary number of votes. The window was longer than usual. And there is a further rule. I mean, let's say if you are calling for a recall, but it's less than 180 days, practicality would say, why don't we just wait till the regularly scheduled election, which is scheduled to be held November 2022. So it's in the hands of the lieutenant governor. Somebody would say, wait a minute, that's probably going to show some favoritism. She is the right-hand person of the governor. Well, but this is the law. The lieutenant governor, in this case, is Eleni Kounalakis, and she is, by law, supposed to call a recall election, all things being equal. So the challengers Now we can get to them. How do you become a challenger? Got to be registered to vote or qualified to vote. So you fit all the requirements. You can't be a criminal, and you can't be someone who's been a governor for 2 terms. So sorry, Jerry, no can do. Can't be on the ballot. Specifically, you've got to get valid signatures on your nomination papers. And you kind of come up with some moolah, over $4,000. But of course, this being California, we have an alternative. If you don't have the money, we're not going to discriminate against you. You can, in lieu of the money, come up with 7,000 valid signatures on top of your 65 to 100 valid signatures, and you don't need the $4,000. So, in addition to that, the Secretary of State, Shirley Weber, she said, wait a minute, signatures, money, good, but we want 5 years of tax returns just prior to the election. Where do you think that idea came from? Correct? It's because of Democrats' frustration with the ex-president of the United States' refusal to come up with his taxes. This is going to be disputed in the courts eventually. Nevertheless, the candidates for governor in this recall election all came up with their tax returns, not a problem. But in the future, this may be contested. Interestingly enough, if you look at the list of candidates for the recall, the one candidate you will not see is Gavin Newsom. He cannot be one of the candidates. And again, rationale would say, wait a minute, you've decided to replace him. Why would you all of a sudden decide to replace Gavin Newsom with Gavin Newsom? So that makes some sense, doesn't it? So how many candidates do you have? 46. Now, if you're veterans of the recall of 2003, you say, not a problem. 46, much easier. Heck, in 2003, we had 135 candidates to choose from. So 46 is going to be child's play. Let's introduce some of the people. There is Kevin Faulconer, who served as the mayor of San Diego, one of California's larger cities, second in fact, predominantly controlled by Democrats, but he still managed to be elected, and that's a feather in his cap, he says, because I have a history of working with Democrats and reaching across the aisle. There is John Cox, that John Cox who lost the election of 2018 to Newsom. He is traipsing all across the state of California with that 800-pounder bear, and he's getting attention in that manner. And he's coming up with the money. He's got putting his money where his mouth is. A former representative, member of the House Representative, Doug Oaks, is one of the main candidates. The social media star, Caitlyn Jenner, yes, he of the Kardashian family fame, and maybe some of the older electorate will remember him as the Olympian, Bruce Jenner. He is one of the main candidates. Interestingly enough, the Republicans held a debate amongst the main challengers. Caitlyn was not available. She was shooting a reality show overseas, was not at the debate. The county of Riverside is sharing their supervisor, Jeff Hewitt, a prominent conservative. He is a main challenger. A prominent member of the assembly, Kevin Kiley, is one of the front runners, often named. Well, I only mention her because she was one of the candidates in 2003, and just an example of anybody who fits those qualifications qualifies as a candidate for this election. She is a model. Angeline traipsed all over the state in her pink exotic automobile. Probably not going to be one of the front runners. Somebody who would have been amongst the most discussed candidates because of his national prominence. He was a member of Trump's cabinet, but he decided, Rick Grinnell, not to run. So he is not going to be on the ballot. Who is on the ballot is a very prominent talk show host, Larry Elder. He is shot to the top percentage-wise. The pollsters are giving him the best numbers, and also shot to the top when it comes to raising money. Great, and a lot of it comes because of his great recognition, name recognition. Larry Elder. It is not specific. We don't have the time to discuss each one of their platforms, but generally speaking, they all favor lower taxes. They are definitely against the mandates for masks and vaccinations. They want to see a stronger presence at the border. When it comes to unions versus business, they are on the side more often than not of businesses. They are looking for a bigger share of water in the valley for ag, and do not want to listen to environmentalists as much. There is no Democratic candidate, say people. And that's wrong. There are 8 Democratic candidates. I think the reason you say that there's no Democratic candidate because they're not very prominent. The institutional Democrats are not backing any one of them. They don't have the backing of the Democratic Party. And the reason for that is the debate. If you did have a prominent Democratic Party, would there be more confusion on the part of the Democratic faithful? And consequently, would they make it easier for the yes vote to become dominant? Or would they be the savior if for some reason the yes vote is the majority? Now you're looking for a Democrat to vote for. You're going to be looking for a Democratic candidate, a prominent Democrat, someone with name recognition. So there is that argument. Speaking of that argument, are you familiar with this person? Well, they were the person in question when the mantra in 2003 was, no on the recall, but if you're going to vote yes, yes on Bustamante. You can see how that was a little confusing. Bustamante obviously was not successful, otherwise he would have been the governor and not Schwarzenegger. So what did that do for his reputation in the Democratic Party? Well, he did win his primary in 2006, soon after the recall election. So I guess the Democrats were forgiving, but not the general electorate, and certainly not independents, as he was one of the few Republican victims. He lost a Republican poisoner in the race for state insurance commissioner. So a lot of Democrats see him as the poster boy for why you don't run in a recall election. Let's look at the people who are endorsing the candidates. As you would expect, the president and the vice president back Newsom. So do prominent senators. So do prominent members of the House. And of course, all the major office holders in Sacramento. They all back Newsom and they oppose the recall. The institutions, as you would guess, the Democratic Party and the prominent unions in California all oppose the recall. When it comes to challengers, nationally, it's the ex-Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, and the spokesperson for Trump, who is now running for governor in Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee. They are endorsing the challengers. So are the prominent representatives from California, Republican representatives from California. They are backing the recall. Institutional-wise, you would expect the Republican Party, but even the Libertarian Party, which lends some credence to that argument. And it's not just Republicans who are supporting the recall. How about the California Republican Party? Certainly they're endorsing someone. The answer would be no. The party decided in a meeting not to do so. And some people say, well, they had planned to do so, but the entrance of Elder in the latter stages of the race has thrown a monkey wrench into the deal and decided to back off. Well, how about the loser in the election of the 2020 election for president of the United States? Much is touted about his endorsements. There is a pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago by people who want to gain his endorsement in offices throughout the United States. Has a Californian been successful in getting his endorsement? Well, as of this date, no. No. What are the reasons for it? Well, first of all, were you listening when I told you how much he lost California by? He does not see a win for a Republican in California. And if he doesn't, and if the recall wins, then there's no loss there. So it's kind of a win-win for him. This is what's the point? The people who are going to support me already support me. So there's no reason why I'd want to do that. And perhaps he's finally listened to his advisors who say, if you endorse the candidate, you would be playing right into the hands of the message that the Democrats are giving to Californians, that it's Trump people who are trying to take over your state. Let's talk about the money in California. Where is the money being placed? Well, it's no surprise to people that the anti-recall people are out raising money of the pro recall people by a tune of what, 5-1? 5-1. Now, this is dated. This is back in July 2nd, so the numbers are going to be much greater, but I don't think the ratio will have changed. And they're saying the bill to California taxpayers for this whole election is going to be 250, well, wait a minute, check that. The latest, $276 million. And of course, I think that number is going to increase, don't you? Anyway, what if we just took that money, 276 million, and divided amongst almost 400,000 Californians, needy Californians? We could give them a check of $770. And there's so many other different ways to spend that money. The opponents of the recall say it's only money thrown down the drain. Who are the people who are funding them? Funding the both movements? Well, the anti-recall committee. It was put together specifically for this recall. They've come up with $22 million. Gavin Newsom on his own was going to use money for his re-election campaign next year, but he's spending some of it now. We told you that John Knox was a prominent Republican. How prominent? Well, he can afford to put up $8 million of his own money. And the committees to oppose the anti-recall committee, they come up with $5 million, but again, outspent 5-1. Faulconer, not to be outdone, even though he is outdone by John Cox, he's putting up his own money, $3 million. Caitlin, I don't know if he's gotten the Kardashian money behind her, but she's come up with $400,000. And Doug Oss, $200,000 of his own money. Proverbs 3.9, I think basically it comes down to, I'm not a biblical scholar, but it's basically share the wealth. They've come up with $500,000, mostly out of the pockets of a prominent businessman who prefers to be unnamed. Jeffrey Palmer, speaking of a prominent businessman, he's come up with $500,000. The party, 180,000, Big Oil, 181,000, a PAC, a prominent PAC, 175,000. Orange County's Lincoln Club, not to be confused with the Lincoln people who produce those anti-Trump ads. They're coming up with $175,000 of their own. These people are proponents of the recall. How about the other side, the Democrats? This gentleman is the main force behind Netflix. He's a billionaire. So $3 million is just a drop in the bucket for him. He used to be a main proponent of Via Regoso. I wish he had been governor, because then I could say Via Regoso all day long. But anyway, Newsom, Via Regoso. And so Reed Hastings changed his allegiance to Newsom. So Newsom has got $3 million of Hastings Netflix money. Not a union, interestingly, but real estate people, $1.5 million, are fighting the recall. Democratic Party, you would guess, and the unions are also bankrolling the anti-recall effort. Now, this is interesting. This is just one of the indigenous groups that is investing in casinos in California. And interestingly, we're missing a zero down there, but they're coming up with $500,000 to help out Newsom. What do the polls say? I know you've lost some of your trust in polls, but how about the University of California? Would you believe them? They showed that it was not much of a race early in the year. A few months separate the first and second poll, but look at the third one. It has become a horse race, ladies and gentlemen. The noose is tightening when it comes to Newsom's proponents. Now, the Remain people are winning by 9%, according to this projection. So the chance of the Remain people winning is 84%. The chance of the recall people winning is only 15%. But this is dated, and the race is tightening. But here's what's interesting, is that Cox and Faulkner were leading the race, both prominent politicians with a history in public office. Not such in the case of Larry Elder. I'm sorry, Cox was not an official, Faulkner was. But Elder has come out of nowhere to lead the race, again, primarily because of name recognition. But then you might say, well, when it comes to name recognition, wouldn't Jenner also be atop these rankings? Well, people explain Elder has a history with the issues, whereas Jenner does not. Here are the trends we identified. You can see the bump in July and, well, early July to late July for Democrats, but then they come back down to 50%. But the huge jump for Republicans in July. A lot of that credit given to Elder. Now, there's always the discussion of the two Californias. Used to be, when I was younger, it was Northern California and Southern California. Now it is Western California, Eastern California. And you only have to look at this map to understand what I'm talking about. The coastal counties are anti-recall. The interior counties, not so much, and specifically the counties of the Northeast. You may have read someplace where they're even thinking about seceding from the state of California, joining up with other Western states and forming a separate state. Probably not going to happen, but interesting to discuss. Okay, let's talk about the nuts and bolts. Let's bring this to a head of sorts. Well, the lawmakers had to make a decision. When is this recall going to take place? Well, originally they wanted to have it in August. Of course, that would have given Newsom a huge advantage because at that time, the pandemic seemed to be in control. This is before the variant, but it did not come about because the lawmakers had to come up with a compromise. Originally, the tag for this election was 215 million. Now we know it's been greater. Finally, a compromise was reached between the powers that be and the counties, because the counties say, hey, we're not ready. We can't handle this early. So the new date, September 14th, 2021. And here is what we're asking you to do. First of all, you're going to vote, yes, I want the recall, or no, I don't want the recall. It's as simple as that. But then some people say it gets complicated because, hey, if I voted no for the recall, aren't I not done? Nope, there's a whole list of candidates who would be elected governor if the majority voted yes. But I didn't vote yes. Why should I vote for one of the challengers? Well, the answer to that is you don't have to if you don't want to. But then you don't get a choice in who the governor is if yes wins the majority. And there's all sorts of jockeying around. Okay, well, then if you're going to do that, then let's find out which one of these candidates would be the lesser of all evils. There are some candidates we want to avoid because we consider them to be radical. Then it does become a little complicated. More controversy. Would you believe it? Gavin Newsom is suing his own Secretary of State, Shirley Weber. He says, on the ballot, there is nothing there that says that I'm a Democrat. Well, he's not on the list of challengers, but there is the mention of, should we recall Gavin Newsom? Why isn't it Gavin Newsom Democrat? Well, Shirley says, because your people didn't register as your name as a Democrat. Coincidentally, it was Newsom himself who had included the right for people to state their party preference in recalls. And somehow, somewhere, they did not do that. Shame on them. So nowhere will you see the name Democrat associated to Gavin Newsom on the ballot. And some people say, are there people that still don't know he's a Democrat? Yes, there are people who still don't know that. Here is a quote from Governor Newsom in the state voters guide. Is it an attempt by national Republicans and Trump supporters? Well, Gavin says a proponent of the recall, you're lying. Orrin Heatley, one of the leaders, says it's not just Republicans, it's independents, it's Democrats, it's populists. They're all opposing you. They're asking for the recall. So of course it goes to court, and the judge, she finally says, there's nothing false or misleading. Maybe there's an omission there, but there is no question that it is Republicans behind this recall movement. Maybe not solely Republicans, but there are Republicans. Consequently, Governor Newsom, you are allowed to say that in the state's voter guide. Okay. If you're going to total the votes, all you need is the simplest, the most razor-thin majorities, 50 plus 1, and the recall is successful. Now, got to introduce a new word to you. We've always loved to say, in America, the majority rules. No, more often not, it's the plurality that rules. Well, what's the plurality? Now, that's a fancy way of saying the person that gets the most votes. So in this case here, if a person has the most votes and they only get 20% of the vote, guess what? You know what they're called? If the yes vote wins, then they're called Governor of California. Schwarzenegger did not get the majority. He did get the plurality, a large plurality, but not the majority. And what did we call him? The Governor of California. Now, here's a misrepresentation. I know I had a friend recently who said, hey, this is going to be a farce. Ballots are being sent to everyone in California. Untrue. They're only being mailed to registered voters in California. By the time you see this presentation, you'll probably have one in your mailbox. 3 simple steps in this election. First of all, you sign up, and you are eligible to sign up, register. If you're a citizen, no, non-citizens will not vote. If you're 18 years or older, if you're going to be 18 on the day of the election, you're not a criminal, and you haven't been found incompetent by a court, not your parents, by a court. The deadline to register is 15 days before the election, which of course makes that magic day August 30th. But we are a state of second chances. We are a country of second chances. And we are a country of changes. The changes come about because, let's say you move. That's when you should re-register. You can't just sit there, no, I've already registered. If you have a new address, let's say you move to a new county, you must re-register. Let's say your last name has changed. Let's say you're a child of 2021 and you are a man who's taken the name of your wife. How's that? Then you should re-register. You have a different last name. Or you are the artist formerly known as. You have to re-register. If you were embarrassed by the occurrences of January 6th and you've changed parties, you must re-register. Now, if you missed that August 30th deadline, you can conditionally register. You can even register on the date of the election. We call that a conditional voter registration or same day registration. Your vote's going to be counted. You're going to get a provisional ballot and your vote will be counted. Not to worry. Okay, you've done all that. Congratulations. Thank you. But you owe it to yourself to do your homework. Got to learn about what you're voting about. So to help out, the state of California is going to give you 2 guides, the County Voter Information Guide and the Official Voter Information Guide. And with those 2 in your hand, you'll be able to see the platforms of the individual candidates. And it behooves you to also read the newspapers, listen to the radio, watch television. Hey, if you can distinguish between fact and lies, also social media, go for it. But either way, get the background, know who you're voting for. Then you vote, and you have many options. This is the state of California. You're going to be getting a ballot in the mail, so you can vote via the mail. Just make sure it's postmarked no later than election day. You can take that ballot. If you don't trust the post office, you can walk it to any voting location in your county. Now, you are old school, go to the polls. They're going to be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. God bless the League of Women Voters. They traditionally take a whole polling place by themselves, and they have volunteers that they will provide. A lot of volunteer service clubs do that. So make sure and thank them on that day. There are people who are going to be there from 7 a.m. in the morning all the way to 8 p.m. that night. Give them a special thank you. Now, you can also do it ahead of time. You don't have to wait till September 14th if you're one of these people that likes to get things done ahead of time, because I also respect those people, because you don't know what's going to happen on the 14th. Any number of things can happen. What's the old saying? Man plans and God laughs. So take out insurance. You can vote ahead of time. As I said before, there are ballot boxes all over the county in your specific city. That's what we like to do. Our family, we're going to go down to the county office and deposit our ballots there. And they're going to be open every day during this period, 8 to 5, every day. Fortunately for you, there are resources that you can avail yourself of. I'm huge on the Voter's Edge, brought to you by the League of Women Voters. League of Women Voters has a long history of nonpartisanship. Don't back a candidate. Don't back a legislation. So in this case, you're going to get a very broad understanding of what's going on. You can avail yourself of them at votersedge.org, and you'll get something like this. You can customize it with your zip code, so you can get a very customized ballot. And this election doesn't really help that much because there's really only one issue at hand. In normal elections where there are a number of propositions and propositions only akin to your specific locality, then it's important. If you're one of these people that may not trust the process, you can track your ballot via this website. And you can also do it at the next resource that I'm talking about. It is the website of the Secretary of State of California. It's the same Shirley Weber I talked to you previously. They can be reached at sos.org. Oodles of information. One of the pieces of information I was very interested in finding is that let's say you are someone who wants to maintain your confidentiality. Let's say you are a victim of abuse and you don't want someone to be able to track you down. There's a whole mechanism to protect your privacy. I was very impressed by the trouble that the Secretary of State goes to. And I would like to say that this is the last time we're going to do this, that people of my age, this is 2 recalls that we now have under our belt, and that's it. But I think it's, unless legislation changes and makes it harder, recalls are too easy to take place, and this is not the last one we are going to have. As mentioned before, we have time for questions now. I will stop this recording. We will come back to live, and we will now be able to avail ourselves of answers. Thanks for your attention.